atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host.
Hello, I am Rex.
And we are back at it again for another episode. And actually, it's a little weird because we're not recording this as we normally would, but this is the last episode before -1.
Oh, damn.
As when this episode goes live, in 2 hours from it going live, I will be sitting in a theater, in an IMAX theater, getting ready to watch Godzilla -1. And then, like, 24 hours after I see it, I think you're seeing it, right?
Give or take.
Roughly, yeah. So,
Give or take.
What you're hearing right now is Rex and Elijah pre-1, and this will be the last time you hear our voices before we see what we've been literally hyping up for since, like, late May. Or no?
It's also worth noting that this is the last episode to come out before Monarch Legacy of Monsters starts airing.
This is true, which I don't know if we've decided if we're going to do anything special for that, but...
Probably not at the moment, but who knows what the future holds, I suppose.
Right. I mean, we literally did an episode on Five Nights at Freddy's and
yeah,
and all of our October viewings, and we decided to do it 24 hours before we actually did it. So
yeah, we're kind of mental.
Yeah. But if you are interested, there will be a video on the YouTube channel of Rex who attended a premiere.
If this is, by the time this is coming out, that would have already come out.
Right, right. Which was what I was saying.
Just a couple early thoughts on the very first episode of Monarch, because I had the privilege of actually getting to see it a week early.
Lucky. So I guess that leads into my great. I guess that leads into my question then. How have you been?
Pretty good for the most part. It's been an interesting week. A lot of rather interesting things have been happening in the personal lives, you know.
Right. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm exhausted.
You honestly, like, you do sound exhausted. Like, I mean, I keep asking you and you're like, nah, I'm good. But like,
I don't even know why I'm exhausted today. I'll wait. It's the heat.
Is it hot? Is it hot where you're at?
Yes, I have been dying for the past 24 hours today.
See,
and yesterday.
Let's just switch because it's too cold for me.
Yeah, please. You know what? If you want this heat, you can keep it.
I'll take it.
Good.
Great.
You and I seem to prefer the opposite climates to what we have. So, you know, I feel like we should just swap.
I think it'd be healthy for us, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's official. I'm going to move to Australia. You're going to move to the United States, and
yeah, you get to go to Florida without the guns or
the stupidity
alligators. I don't know if I'd say without that. I don't know. I don't know if the word without is a good choice of words there.
Fair enough. But I guess, you know, like I just said, I'm pretty cold, all things considered. So
God, I wish it was cold.
I'm cold and I'm working more hours than ever. This week I'm going to end up working about 60 hours.
Absolutely deranged.
In all fairness, I do have to fund like a weekend trip on this one paycheck and pay for car repairs and pay for some other side purchases.
Absolutely deranged.
So it's been kind of cray-cray. But with that being said, I'm doing decent. I mean, I spent my 1 day off this week. Well, I say that, but I had to go in and work for an hour and a half anyway. So either way, I still work today. But I spent the rest of my day just cleaning. I've been busy. It's either I'm working on cleaning, actual work, podcasting, or working on videos. So I've just been busy as per normal. And it's going to be this way until like the second week of December, where it'll just be I'm recording podcasts and I'm working.
Because you've been working so much, I wonder if you've had any time for Tokusatsu this week.
So actually I have, but it was a 15-minute short film.
Oh.
So does it really count?
That's a great question.
Well, I'll tell you what it was anyway. It was called Edo of the Dead, and it is a YouTube short film from a Japanese director of, guess what? Zombies in Edo period Japan.
No way.
And a ninja fights them. And there's a love plot, and it all happens in 15 minutes. And it was okay. It was fine. Like, it's 15 minutes. What do you expect? It had great cinematography, and they used their dolly track as much as humanly possible. That's where all of their budget went.
Well, that's fun at least.
But outside of that, I'm boring. I won't be, honestly. I guarantee you right now, I do not watch more than like 4 movies within now and our next recording after -1. Like, I'm not going to have time. I'm going to try and watch 54 in GMK before -1, and then I'm going to see -1. I'm going to try to fit in a movie. I was going to watch one called Junrei, The Uncanny, but I started it, and like, I got like 3 minutes in, I was like, I'm not feeling it. And I just shut it off. I was like, I'm not. I had Japanese to learn. I had you to call. I had dinner to eat. It just didn't work out. But how have you watched any Tokusatsu?
Not very much.
More than my 15-minute short film?
I've watched, I guess, a little more, since I want to say I rewatched 1 or 2 more episodes of Garo. Plus, I did, as I mentioned previously, even though it's not really Tokusatsu, I did go see the first episode of Monarch. So, that's a little more.
I want the listeners to go watch your initial thoughts, but if you had to describe your thoughts in 1 sentence, what would you say?
What would I say? It's the tone. Think 2014, but Godzilla 2014, but actually good.
Okay.
And interesting characters.
And if you want to hear his full thoughts, definitely check out that video. It's a fun little like vlog, right?
I mean, there isn't a huge amount of thoughts in it. It's short. It's really short, so
But it's not gonna. It's longer than that, at least.
Sure, but that's like bare minimum.
This is true.
1 sentence is bare minimum, let's say.
This is true. But no, we'll be watching Monarch here pretty soon, and I'm kind of excited to see what comes.
I'm very interested in seeing the next episode and where they go with certain things that I won't spoil.
Thank you, because I'd like to go into Monarch with about as much knowledge as I already have.
There's some interesting things in the first episode, I'll say.
But with that, I guess we can segue here into I mean, geez, this is kind of a quick opening. We're both so busy. We're just kind of like, yeah, we're here.
Hey, the editor and me has no problem with that.
I'm sure. But I guess
my hard drive doesn't either.
I guess this is where we can segue into the main topic of this week, which is about
the 1967 film
King Kong Escapes.
No. That's the wrong Toho film. That's the wrong one. That's from the A-Team of Honda, Tsuburaya, and it's got Takarada in it.
And Ifukube.
Him too. You see, this film has Mr. Jun Fukuda returning as director.
Hey, we covered a Jun Fukuda film last week.
Yeah, we did. Masaru Sato as composer.
We covered a film with him last week too.
And Sadamasa Arikawa as the special effects director.
He did the effects for the last film we talked about.
Yeah.
Are we just covering Ebra Horror of the Deep again?
No, we're covering its sequel, 1967's Son of Godzilla.
Oh!
Also known as Kaiju to no Kesen Gojira no Musuko.
The Battle of Monster Island, Son of Godzilla?
Yes.
Whoa, okay. You know, now that you say that, I think I did see it.
Good, because we scheduled this.
Oh, perfect. It was released December 16th of 1967, and it eventually came over, dubbed by Titan Sound, which also did most of the Showa Godzilla films, and released by Walter Reed in 1969 to American television. And then it also saw a second theatrical release in Japan in 1973.
As part of the Champion Festival.
Yes, sir. So where do we start with this one? Do we kind of pick up where Ebra Horror of the Deep left off? Do we talk about...
Sure. I mean, last time we kind of brought up how Japan was going through a bit of the monster boom. Yeah, the year that this film came out, 1967, was probably the biggest year for that first major monster boom.
Right.
Given that in that year, all four of the major Japanese film studios released at least one kaiju film. Daiei had Gamera vs. Gyaos, Shochikyu, the X from Outer Space, the Katsu Gappa, and then Toho did, as we just mentioned, King Kong Escapes and Son of Godzilla. Meanwhile, Ultra 7 was also airing on television by Tsuburaya Productions.
And Ultraman had just wrapped up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was a fair bit of giant monsters at this point in time.
Right.
And yeah. So, the Godzilla series was starting to have a lot of competition, especially with the Gamera series becoming more and more popular with children, which is something that some of the people at Toho, such as producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, sort of noticed. And so this is where an idea sort of came about. To appeal to children, maybe we could give Godzilla a kid.
Well, I heard that was kind of out of desperation. By this point,
although apparently it had been considered around 3 years prior as well. I think
I want to say it was
I've read
back in the 50s. There was an idea tossed, if I remember right.
Are you sure you're not thinking of Bride of Godzilla?
Well, there was an idea of Godzilla having an heir because, so I guess we'll jump on this and then I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit. It's very common to find in monster franchises that the monster ends up having a sort of offspring. Yes.
Yeah, especially at this time when you had films like Son of Dracula, I believe.
Dracula's Daughter.
Oh, Dracula's Daughter.
Which was the sequel to Dracula. You had the sequel to King Kong, which was Son of Kong.
There no Son of Dracula?
There is no Son of Dracula.
Am I going crazy?
Yes.
You sure?
Actually, apparently there was.
I told you.
But that was long after you had the actual sequel to Dracula, which was Dracula's daughter.
I mean, hey, it still came before Son of Godzilla. So,
and so I mean, it was a little. It was kind of a little weird that Godzilla had yet to have that, but like you said, there was some ideas for that plenty of years prior. Tanaka suggested that the reason they did Son of Godzilla was because they were out of ideas. Because I mean, at this point, since 1962, they had developed a Godzilla movie every year, all penned by Shinichi Sekizawa, all produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, majority of them directed by Ishiro Honda, majority of them effects directed by Eiji Tsuburaya, majority of them music by Akira Ifukube, most of them with the same cast.
right.
Up until 1966, right?
Yeah, speaking of Sekizawa, he was tapped for this film once again, but he actually brought on, I want to say, his protege to sort of start.
I read that Tanaka approached his collaborator because it wasn't his protege as much as it was his collaborator who had helped him on some lyrics for other films.
Okay. Actually, that might actually be more right. I think that might actually be more accurate. Yeah, I think that's more accurate.
Yeah, because the name that we're talking about, the person we're talking about, Kazue Shiba.
Yeah, Chiba, I think some sources translate her name as.
She wrote a treatment called To Godzilla's Tokyo SOS.
Japan SOS.
I read translations saying Tokyo SOS.
Pretty sure John LeMay's book refers to it as Japan SOS. But regardless, To Godzilla's Japan SOS was actually it was, quote, used as a springboard for Sekizawa's eventual script that would become what the final film is. But To Godzilla's Japan SOS was rather different from how we now know the film, with it being a bit less child-friendly, less comical, a bit darker in tone. With Godzilla Jr. and Godzilla himself being more or less the big threats of the script.
Right, which, I mean, I don't... See, I know that that's what the LeMay book says, that it was kind of used as, like, the jumping off point because Sekizawa kind of had run dry with ideas. But I think part of it... I mean, I think he also brings this up in there. The script, which I don't know, did you want to dive into that, or did you want to, like, hold off on diving into Godzilla's?
We can dive into it a little bit, I'd say.
Okay, so the idea was Godzilla would be with Godzilla Jr., as it was named in the script, and they would be on an island, and there would be a volcanic...
Godzilla
Island, right? And there would be a volcanic eruption, which, like, encapsulated both of them, and then they would show up in Tokyo, and then destroy some parts of Tokyo, and then, like, this tsunami would come and wipe them out. But when you hear the script, none of that would make sense in the context of, and this kind of goes back to what I was going to bring up a little earlier, that we brought up. Son of Godzilla was made on a desperate, like, we need to put out a Godzilla film this year. And it was clearly meant to be for children, but they had already used their A-team, like you mentioned, for King Kong Escapes. And so they brought the team, like, as soon as Ebra was ready to go, they put Fukuda on Son of Godzilla. And so they wanted the B team to produce a cheap, quick Godzilla movie, and the film's runtime is only isn't it like 67?
87.
87? Okay, yeah. 87 minutes, which is pretty short. Isn't that's like a little shorter than Ebra?
It's about the same runtime, actually.
Is it? I could have swore Ebra was like 80. Let's see, Ebra's 87. Okay, it's 86. So it's yeah. But even then, that Ebra was short, and I mean, they're not cutting a lot, but they're still making a little shorter of a film. But either way, like they're both short. All things considered,
right?
And they were supposed to like make it for a quarter of the budget, maybe not a quarter, but like half the budget of the Honda films.
Mm-hmm.
And the story that Shiba produced was way.
I mean, that's why Tanaka passed the two Godzilla script to Sekizawa. He refined and transformed it, changing the tone, limiting the setting, and increasing the monster roster.
Right.
I mean, there are elements in that script that do transfer over to the final film.
Right.
Like Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
And her father, who was an actual living character in the script.
Right, and then the whole idea of controlling the weather was in there as well.
Yeah.
I guess the adult Godzilla carried over, and then the idea was on an island, of course.
And then, of course, having a Son of Godzilla.
Right. Now, in the two Godzilla script, it appeared to be more of like a teenage. I mean, when I hear Godzilla Jr., obviously, I automatically think of Heisei.
Right.
But the way they kind of...
I mean, he was even supposed to be, I want to say, 30 meters tall.
Yeah.
I think.
It was supposed to be more of like a teenage or like an adolescent Godzilla, not so much like a newborn child.
Yeah. I mean, there's no hatching scene in the script, so...
Right, because both Godzilla and Godzilla Jr. would just show up on the island and become the problem.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I'll just say this, I wish we got the two Godzilla story more than what we got, because the two Godzilla story, I think, has a little bit better writing in terms of the human side of the issues, which we'll talk about once we dive into the film itself, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, this is one of those examples of, I think what we got ended up being a little lacking, all things considered.
Eventually in 1967, Sekizawa would submit the final script, and production for the film would occur, with filming starting around July of 67, with a lot of the filming taking place overseas, in places like Guam, and also various like other sort of islands in Japan, or regional areas in Japan, like Lake Yamana, Gotemba, Oshima, and Fuji 5 Lakes region as well.
Right, which this was the first Godzilla film to actually be shot overseas, from what my research said.
Not counting American edited stuff.
right. But original produced content, like this was the first. And that was because it was a partnership with Pan American Airlines. And so they got it they got some discounts or credits for, flying the actors out to Guam and filming. However, the headlining actor, not the main character, but the headlining actor that seems to have most of the spotlight, Tado Takashima, refused to go, so they had to get a stunt double to play him in those scenes. And then when they flew back to Japan, all the other actors were not happy with him, and he would shoot on the soundstage. And his excuse was he couldn't act as good overseas as he could in Japan. I don't know. Probably just so he could get another job while waiting for them to film. Truth be told, I feel like that sounds like a very reasonable
Honestly,
excuse.
I just heard that he disliked flying.
Maybe. So, like, in scenes where you don't see his face, or maybe I was wondering if some of the scenes where he's wearing glasses, like sunglasses, it's not actually him under that. It's the double, and he, you know, when he's on the camera, like on the screen, that's obviously him on the soundstage or like on location in Japan.
Yeah.
Now, I will say it is kind of interesting to note that, I mean, even with the budgets decreasing on these films, they were, you know, starting to do things like going and filming in other countries and whatnot. I do think that's very interesting, along with like Toho. You know, this is the year of kaiju. Like when you think about it and put it into context, Son of Godzilla is in the year of kaiju because of, like what you said, the aforementioned 4 of the major 5 Japanese studios released a kaiju film in Japan. If you want to count it, there was also Yongari Monster from the Deep, which was a Toei semi-co-produced, in air quotes, film, but that never saw Japanese theaters. That only got overseas releases. But you also had stuff like Red Shadow, which was a television series Toei produced that had kaiju appear in it, that was airing at the time. And there was also a compilation film, Ninja Scope, The Magical World of Ninjas, that had been created for some international markets that featured one of the kaiju episodes in it. So even then, there was still kind of a little bit of Toei rep, but not nearly as much as the other studios. But even then, like, this was kind of the grand finale to that year. In that sense, with the scope of where they were filming, that definitely takes precedence and is very clear.
Right. And I mean, even with like the decreased budget, you still actually do have Eiji Tsuburaya involved in the film, even though he was, his main project at the time was King Kong Escapes, and then also he'd be working at Tsuburaya Productions, his own company. But he was still, quote, actively involved, end quote, on this film as, a special effects supervisor for his protege, Mr. Arikawa.
Right. But even then, there is some like questions about that, because the final film is missing a lot of effects footage, which was not something Tsuburaya did. There was a lot of cut stuff of Godzilla interacting with Manila, being a little more abusive and whatnot.
Is there any way I can get that footage?
I mean, there's a little bit. There's some footage in the Japanese trailer, and I think that shot of Godzilla leaving Manila in the snow is available.
Yeah, I know there's like a work print of like the outtake for the end, for like the longer version of the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a clip of like the original version of Manila's beam effect as well. Instead of, like, before Tsuburaya suggested the smoke rings, Arikawa kind of had something that was for Manila's beam that was more akin to just Godzilla's regular beam, but just a much weaker version of that. Mm-hmm. That couldn't really go very far.
But see, it's a little weird because, I mean, the way Tsuburaya worked, he wouldn't film more than what he would have to. Mm-hmm. He was very much like, you get what I have. Like, I'm not going to give you more. I'm not going to give you less. You're going to get what I have. I mean, on a few rare occurrences, Tsuburaya would like do a few extra effect shots and whatnot. Pre Son of Godzilla, the only one that I think is even remotely notable is the unused version of Ghidorah's Awakening from Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, which I've never seen, admittedly, but I'd love to.
Wait, you've never seen the alternate take of that?
I've never seen the alternate take.
Are you sure? I swear we talked about it once.
I've just been told that it's arguably superior than the one we got.
It's that, and that's because it doesn't have the jump cut. You've never seen that?
I have never seen. No.
Are you sure?
Swear to God.
Have you watched like the Toho unused special effects documentary on the Criterion set?
Not yet. No.
What? Why not? Go watch that. It's on there. That's where that's the source of that clip. It's on there. Go watch that.
Well, maybe I should do that soon.
Yeah, go. Let's do it. But not now.
I mean, I can't. I'm not even able to.
I don't know. From what I've heard, he was quite actively involved, and there are a fair lot of like production and post-production photos of him on like the set of the film. Like even at Manila's naming ceremony, there's a photo of him with Arikawa.
Right.
Otherwise, there isn't really a huge amount of documentation that I'm, at least in English, of like his specific involvement outside of a couple anecdotes, really.
Right. And honestly, I would say even further, this movie definitely does not feel like a Tsuburaya film when it comes to the effects. Which, I mean, no. I think it's kind of a fresh, nice coat of paint over what we had previously seen as well. Right.
I mean, there's also just the fact that, this film does not have the budget to be as grand as what, Tsuburaya would typically do back, in like 64 or 65.
Right.
But, yeah. There's a little bit more to talk about with the effects, but we should I feel like we should at least start transitioning to the film itself first.
All right. Okay. So so do you want to start us off in the film?
Sure. I mean, the film opens after our Toho logos. We get a cold open of sorts with some reconnaissance people in like an airplane going over the seas, and there's mysterious radio interference. And then suddenly, from the ocean, Godzilla rises out, and he looks awful.
Now, real quick, I do want to say, so the plane is a weather plane. They're checking weather.
Right, yeah.
And one of the pilots just so happens to be the actor for Shin Hayata of Ultraman fame.
Susumu Kurobe.
Which, I mean, he played a lot of, like, side characters that appeared for, like, 5 minutes in the Toho films very frequently. Yeah.
All the way up till the Heisei era, even, in the Godzilla series.
But no, you bring up the Godzilla appearance here, and it is the 1966 suit.
Yeah. It's somehow looking even worse.
Well, I mean, a year had passed since they used it, and they're using it for water scenes, so it's just degrading even more.
Yeah, that's a bad combination. This, a lot of people complain about the main suit of this film, but I would argue this is the far worse looking suit.
Right, and after this, I mean, before this film even was shot, they had to pull that head off too. So this was after the Gyros.
Yeah, this was after like the head modification and all that.
So this suit had already been used in 65, and then they reused it in 66. Then they took the head off, used the head for an episode of Ultraman, put the head back on, and was reusing it for water sequences for this film. So, I mean, this suit had, I mean, honestly, this is probably the most, like, a suit from this time had to put up with in terms of just what it had to go through, because I mean,
Right.
wasn't it used for the water shots in Astro Monster as well? Is there?
Are there any water shots in Astro Monster?
Actually, I don't think
outside of like the puppet.
I don't think there is now that I say that. So I mean, it was used for
Astro Monster,
right? And then wasn't it used? It was used for the water shots in Sea Monster.
Yeah, it was used for the entirety of Sea Monster because it was recycled.
And then so I mean,
just replaced the head in the last 10 minutes of the film because of Jiras.
No matter what, this suit, I mean.
Oh, and they also removed the padding as well.
That's right, they did.
Which is probably why it loses its form near the end of Ibra after all the water shooting.
And I mean, even here, it's mucking up the look.
Oh yes, yeah, especially when it reappears a little later into the film, and he rises out of the water again.
Right,
it does not look great.
Which I guess we can kind of continue on with the plot here. I do have one question. I've never understood like the whole idea of radio waves being interfered by Godzilla. Like that doesn't make a ton of sense.
I don't know. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for that. I mean, it's not Godzilla himself that's doing it. It's Manila, to be fair. But then again, same species.
Maybe. It's never entirely established that they're the same species, because isn't there some reference material that suggests that Godzilla adopts Manila?
Only in the English language. Japanese, I mean, the film itself is like pretty quick to be like, that's Godzilla, that's a baby Godzilla. And like, the Japanese DVD just refers, and the theater pamphlet, just refer to it as a baby Godzilla.
Gotcha. And I mean, Manila itself means little Godzilla.
And I mean, hell, he wasn't even named when the film was being produced. He was just being called like Godzilla Jr. or Kojira. Kojira, I'm presuming that the Ko comes from the word, the kanji Ko, for child. So, child Godzilla.
Gotcha, okay.
So, yeah, it's pretty heavily suggested that it's a baby Godzilla. And, I mean, the characters even state that in the film.
Right.
But, yeah, Godzilla is, because of the mysterious interference that is being caused by Manila, Godzilla is essentially being lured to an island, Solgale Island. This is where our credits roll and we get our nice little score from Masaru Sato.
Right, which, I mean, one thing I will say that I really appreciate about the film, and it's really established here in the establishing shots of Solgale Island, the movie is very colorful. Like, this is easily the most colorful Godzilla movie of the time period.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just it's a nice looking movie, I'd say, as well. I don't think it ever reaches the heights of like some of the previous films, like Ibra even.
See,
I feel like Ibra had a couple moments that were just stunning. Like there's a handful of shots in that film that look absolutely stunning during the on-location shooting, and I feel like Son of Godzilla just kind of has the same consistent look throughout, which is not a bad thing. It just never reaches the heights.
See, I would agree and disagree. I agree that the on-location of Ebirah is definitely better than Son of Godzilla. Like that's the on-location stuff for Son of Godzilla, and I think a lot of it comes from there's not a lot of wide shots. There's not a lot of long shots. Not a lot of like big shots of
and I think the most of those that do appear in the film are on the soundstage.
Right. Now I love Toho's soundstage. I established that last recording as well. But in Son of Godzilla, it's all reduced to medium and close-ups. It's not a lot of, here's a wide angle shot of on location filming. It was all very close-up, very, claustrophobic, maybe trying to make it a more personalized story.
Right.
But with that, I will say, with that being said, I think due to the fact that they're making it very close, and when they do have those more wider shots, those larger shots, they use matte paintings. Sogale Island does feel larger than Lecce Island.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. Solgal Island feels more like
an island.
Yeah.
Because the way Lecce Island feels, it's like, okay, so there's the dock, and then you go a little bit in and you have the base. And then like around the corner of the base is where the infant islanders are. And there's a hill, and if you go up to the hill, like if you keep going that way, you get to the cliff on the other side of the island where Godzilla's at. And that's like, and then like around the hill, there's a little area that's rocks where Godzilla sleeps. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot to Ebira's island layout. However, Sogale Island, there's a lot of different places, and they all have unique looks to them, right? Like you have the cave, you have the base area, you have various shots of like the coastline, you have the area where the red water is, you have
Monga Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the different like iodide areas as well.
Right. And they establish,
and then just the beach.
Right. And there's even like an establishment of like there's an ecosystem here, like there's animals and there's
right.
There's plants you can eat, right? Like it's never established that the berries are on Lecce Island. So there's really not a lot to.
Right. I mean, you can kind of infer that the berries are probably could be from Lecce Island, to be fair.
But you could also infer
Infant Island.
Right, and that's what I was about to say. It could be Infant Island. We don't know. They don't establish. So you're kind of left to infer either or, right?
I mean, that's kind of the issue with Ebra, is that it kind of just doesn't establish a lot of things. It doesn't give you much to go off with, like the red bamboo and all that type deal.
Right. So I think opening the film with all of these establishing shots does help, because they do establish. They clearly establish a very large location with some beautiful matte paintings with Sato's score. That is very much a very cheerful and happy score.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love the score for this film. I think I definitely like it more than the Ebra score. It's I like Manila's theme.
And kind of going off of that, diving back into the plot here as the theme continues, as the establishing shots continue, we then get the base, right?
Yeah.
Which I also like this base a little bit more, because something that I think Ebra does is the red bamboo's base is in this clear area where there's no trees, there's no nothing. Like it looks like they've just terraformed this island. But here it looks like the base that we then cut to had to work around everything.
Yeah, it's a really nice set. And one thing as well is that the inside of the base actually kind of looks lively, whereas the base in Ebra, a lot of the interiors of that base feel very empty or lacking in detail. Especially for some of the corridors, with there really only being like one room, which is like it's the main room with all the pipes and all that. That's like the only real room that actually kind of looks like it's all right. That's kind of the best room in the film, but everyone else feels like there needs to be more or should be more.
Right. No, I agree with that. And it is nice, and I think a lot of that just simply comes from the fact that this film is more colorful. And maybe they had a little less of because they had the budget to make a miniature set for Ebirah that was kind of, they had a whole, it wasn't reduced to like close-ups. But for Son of Godzilla, they had to do close-ups. I don't know if they spent all their budget on making the island miniature sets and they couldn't do like the base miniature set as much, but because
I think there's only I want to say there's only really miniature shots of like the iodide things, like those iodide stations, because I know Godzilla walks past a few of them. Maybe one of them gets crushed, maybe.
Well, Godzilla does destroy the base here in like 10 minutes into the film.
I mean, it's not really Godzilla that destroys the base. It's the storm.
No, because the storm, they take refuge in the base, and then Godzilla comes, and he's the one that really messes up the base where everything's broken.
Oh yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, you're right. I blanked that.
But I mean, speaking of the story, going back into, we're then introduced to our main supporting characters. This film does something kind of weird, where the quote unquote main character is introduced after almost everybody else, and we kind of follow the scientists for a vast majority of the film, besides the side quests of our main character and the lead supporting character. But we get established on kind of what they're doing. They're talking about an experiment. We don't know what exactly yet. And we get an establishment that like the leader of this is very much determined on doing this.
Yeah, Professor Kasumi, whom is played by Tadao Takashima.
And meanwhile, we're also introduced to them doing their checkups on the towers to ensure everything's running. Essentially, we're kind of introduced to kind of this interesting story on these scientists who have volunteered to do scientific work on this island. And we get to see kind of their day-to-day, which is kind of cool. They're checking towers, ensuring everything's working.
And we get little hints and set up to some things that'll pay off later, like with one of the scientists played by Yoshio Tsuchiya, Furukawa, seemingly be a bit on edge, which we find out a bit later that because everyone on the island has been here, currently on the island, has been here for over a month and starting to go a little crazy, particularly Tsuchiya's character.
Right. Which, I mean, in all fairness, I feel like that's something Tsuchiya does. Like, most of his characters just are grumpy.
I mean, he's usually playing aliens like half the time, so,
This is true. But correct me if I'm wrong, but after we're kind of given the establishment of our supporting characters and what they're doing as they're prepping for their experiment, they hear the buzzing of a plane.
Yeah, they go to investigate, and a guy just parachutes down. This is Goromaki, our film's protagonist, who's just a reporter looking for a scoop, and whom somehow learnt about this top secret experiment.
Right,
that Professor Kasumi and the others are engaging in.
Because even Kazumi says the only people that know we're here is like the directors of the UN.
Yeah. And so how Goromaki found out, who knows? They never ask him.
He just says he had a gut feeling and he went.
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, no,
but he clearly has some idea about the experiment as well. Because he kind of tries prying about it. Like, why is this top secret and all that?
Right. It just, I don't know. And this is the beginning of the declining story of the human characters, because I feel like this film does not establish its characters and the problems its characters are doing well at all. But we'll talk about that as we continue here. So Goromaki refuses to leave until he gets his story. And they don't give him a story.
Yeah,
but hours
Professor
go by.
Kasumi is very adamant on that.
Right. And as hours go by, eventually they go and they break and they say, why don't you just help us by being our handyman and our cook and doing all of that? And he agrees to do it. And then his reporter part of him basically is irrelevant for the rest of the story.
I mean, he still tries to pry for information here and there for at least the next 10-ish minutes.
For the next 10 minutes he asks questions, but then he doesn't. And he just becomes another one of the guys.
Yeah. But it's also during the sequence where where he essentially first becomes a member of their team, that there's also a noise.
Mm-hmm.
A giant mantis is in the area, and this is essentially where we're established that this island is filled with these, or at least has some of these giant mantis creatures, and that it's dangerous to be out in the jungle alone.
Right, and I love the lighting, like the way they it's funny because the human-sized Kamacuras is very well shot, because it's kind of shot kind of like in a horror tone. The only thing you see are its big eyes, and you hear it, and you can hear it like moving in the trees.
Right, you only get small glimpses of it.
Which is genius. I love that. And there's some really great shots that are like, and they're all close-ups. They're all, up-close shots that are really good with our kaiju in this film. And I love the fact that even before anything happens, the Kamacuras is already abnormally large.
Yeah.
And I would love to see, maybe them, in a future film, maybe bring the Kamacuras back and kind of have, the small ones and the big ones. That's such a cool concept. It's something that I feel like Megaguirus kind of tackled. And Godzilla Battle Line kind of does that with the Kamacuras Horde.
Right, where you have, the Horde, and then you also just have the big Kamacuras as well, single unit one.
But that stuff's kind of cool. I like that stuff.
Yeah. No, and I think the Kamacuras in this movie are pretty neat. The new kaiju introduced in this movie, Kamacuras and later Kumonga, a giant spider, they're not the most creative design, same with Ibara, but they look good. They're portrayed really well in the film. The Kamacuras was actually designed by Nobuyuki Yasumaru, who would go on to create the Gorosaurus suit, as well as even I believe the Godzilla 84 suit as well, if I remember right.
Interesting.
Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he was the one who did that. But yeah, no, they had a bunch of different props for the Kamacuras. I believe they had about 9 in total. 3 for they had 3 for a small 3 small models, 3 medium-sized models, and 3 large models. For puppets. Yeah.
Well, that's another interesting thing here is in this film, there's only 2 suited kaiju, and that's Godzilla and his son.
Right. The antagonist monsters are puppets.
Right, which is very interesting. And there was a lot of problems with that because of the fact they were puppets. I think they said the Kamanga puppet ended up having more puppeteers than Ghidorah did.
Oh, yeah. The Kamanga puppet it had about like 20. Because like the thing is, so there were like 6 different Kamanga puppets.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one was about 5 meters long, and it would have multiple joints on each of its legs. So, a spider has 8 legs, so does Kamanga. To control one leg, you needed at least 2 to 3 technicians.
I want to say they said there was like 30 altogether.
It was, quote, often had more than 20 puppeteers working the wires from a platform mounted over top the stage.
And when you think about that, like the fact that Kamanga moves like he does is remarkable.
It is really impressive. And there was quite literally a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into the puppetry in this film. So much so that during filming, there were a lot of times where just shots were kind of ruined by the puppeteers just sweating onto the set.
Going back here to the plot, at least, a couple days, go by, and we start to see the integration of Goramaki with the scientists. But even before that, while Maki is he with Dr. Kasumi when he's out patrolling with the towers?
I mean, there's a bit of banter with him. Like he goes looking for some vegetables for to cook, to prepare for.
Oh, that's
meals,
right. That's right. Yeah,
and ends up spotting a woman. Just some random woman on the island in the water.
Right.
Eventually, he discusses this with the group, but they just don't believe him. What the hell would a random woman be doing on this island we surveyed countless times?
Right. That's right. Because, yeah.
And then following that is when they do their first attempt at the experiment.
But before they even do that, Maki does ask a couple questions, kind of doing the whole reporter thing. And what I love is we learn about the experiment with him. Like, we start the story without him, and we get some establishments, kind of the basic premises. And then once he appears, everything we learn with him.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes the audience in a way of like, now we're following what he gets to see, what he's having to go through. Because, I mean, he is our main character, despite the fact that this film feels more like an ensemble than like there's a lead.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that. I like learning about everything as Goramaki does. And the experiment is learning how to control the weather, which sounds cool, but would have
very awful implications.
And
which they sort of address it in sort of like a hand wave line, with them establishing that the experiment is secret to prevent, such a device falling into the wrong hands.
And we kind of see why following this, because we then go to, after we, learn about this stuff with Goramaki, we jump to the scientists and Maki setting up and getting ready for their first experiment.
Right.
Which then Goramaki goes to try and warn the girl, and, as they're getting everything going and setting it up, suddenly the radio wave interference comes back. which leads to problems with the experiment that causes the balloon that has the materials to change the weather explode.
Yeah, causing a bunch of radiation and heat to be expelled.
Right,
all over the island.
Which creates radioactive storms. That includes flooding and intense heat, like you said. Now, if they're radioactive storms, how are they able to go? Because, I mean, after a few shots of the storms, we cut to the guys getting out of the base 4 days later.
Right.
How does that work? If it was radioactive, then they can't do that. It doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, you could almost argue that, like, maybe there's not enough radiation to actually, like, harm them if it weren't for the fact that the mantises, the Kamacuras, in a little bit following this scene, we discover that the Kamacuras have grown to rather gigantic sizes.
Right. And, like, all the plants got killed. It just doesn't make sense. This is the beginning of the downfall of this plot, because the weather control equipment doesn't hold its weight and also doesn't make sense. And I blame that on the lack of exploring it in the script and establishing the implications that it has outside of the throwaway lines that we hear.
Yeah, see, I don't have a major issue with like some of what you're taking issue with, but just the one thing that really feels off of me is the lack of any exploration of like the implications, bar that one hand wave line. Especially like with like Godzilla 54 being in recent memory for me after a recent rewatch, with like the whole Serizawa character in that film, and like his whole thing about destroying his research to prevent anyone else from getting access to his technology until the oxygen destroy it, until he can find a actual beneficial use to a peaceful use for it to humanity. I mean, I guess this has a peaceful use, but it's still, it just feels off to just hand wave all the implications,
right,
of such a device.
And I'm going to dive into that a little later when we get to the end. But one of the things it does do is, as we've mentioned, it makes the Kamacuras, the Kamakuri? Is that the multiple version of Kamacuras? Kamakuri.
I mean, in Japanese, just saying the word is both typically the single and the plural version, unless you're like Kamacuras Tachi.
So the Kamacuras have grown to epic proportions. And as basically within 2 minutes of our characters leaving the base, they see this.
Yeah.
And as they follow to where the Kamacuras is going, they're going to this mound of dirt.
Which is also where the interference is sourced from.
And as they watch, they're destroying the mound and reveal an egg.
Eventually, this egg hatches and the Son of Godzilla emerges.
Which, to me, the way I understood it is the egg hatched. I mean, the egg didn't hatch. It was broken open, right? Because the Kamacuras were bashing away at it. So I've always viewed it as Manila was kind of premature. That's why he looks the way he does, especially when he's like freshly hatched. Is like, because, I mean, when you think about it, that does line up. Like, Manila was not supposed to hatch yet.
I mean, clearly he's at a developmental stage where he's pretty close, I feel like.
Maybe.
Especially given he is calling
True. But following his premature hatching, he just starts getting, like, mutilated by the three Kamakras.
It's survival of the fittest with them. Absolutely survival of the fittest.
And they kind of just let this happen for a while.
Yeah.
Which also doesn't make a lot of sense. Because after we get the establishment of the Kamakras are basically beating Manila to death and then are going to eat him, which is the implications. Then we cut to the human drama where we find out that the girl was stealing Goromaki's shirt. They discover her.
Right. Furukawa, who was already clearly the most on edge, is just going mad and wants to leave the island.
And he runs off to the beach where two other characters, which are, I believe, isn't it?
Fujisaki?
Yes.
Oh, I should also mention that they had a meeting earlier and where Fujisaki claimed that the radio was unusable because it was destroyed by heat.
I'm pretty sure that...
But then Fujisaki later says that he actually just destroyed it himself.
Yeah, I will say that part did, like, make me really confused. Like, that...
And it's portrayed as a good thing?
Yeah. Which is really abnormal.
Yeah.
No, see, that's something too, is like this whole movie, like the scientists are doing something bad. Like they're creating a device to control the weather, which could destroy climates, and they even say that they fully intend on using it like in the Sahara Desert, in the Arctic, to like grow more food.
Right.
And then we find out that Akihito Hirata's character lies about destroying the radio, and then then he destroys it, and it's like, wait a minute, like, what are we doing? The leader of this is so determined that he's pushing his men to go crazy, but he's still viewed as a noble hero. It's kind of off-putting. It's like, why are we doing this? Like,
yeah, it's rather odd.
All of our characters here are not good characters. It's like watching Matango, but wanting everybody to be the hero.
I mean, I'd say Akira Kubo is at least a decent human being in this film.
I would agree with that. Akira Kubo in this film is clear, and that's why you can tell he's clearly the hero, because he's the only one that doesn't do anything that's morally gray.
Right.
Like, he's just trying to find information.
Right. I mean, Kenji Sahara is also just there.
But, I mean, he's a part of the scientists.
Right. But he does nothing wrong.
Right, but, you know, the scientists are still, like, doing something kind of awful.
True.
Like,
but, alas... Oh, continue.
I was just going to say, like, I don't think there's a way you can argue that any of the scientists are heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But alas, Furukawa ends up running to the beach, desperate to leave. He's just going to swim by hand. Fujisaki tries to stop him, but both stop in their tracks and retreat once they see Godzilla rising from the ocean.
Which, don't we cut from the 66 suit here to the 67 suit as he rises and then as he's walking on land?
Yeah. Because the scene starts off, you know, the water shots in Godzilla coming onto land are that 66 suit and are portrayed by the original suit actor, Haruo Nakajima. And this and the opening are the only two scenes that Nakajima filmed for.
Right, because they had to build a larger suit to make Godzilla appear larger than Manila. So the film was supposed to have Seiji Onaka.
And they did do filming with him, but then midway through the filming, during a baseball game, he broke his fingers.
Right, because he was a baseball player.
And so they got Hiroshi Sekida to fill in for the rest of the shooting.
So I guess this is the most actors that played Godzilla in a movie?
I guess.
Now, I will say, I wonder if Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla did take any influence here, because this is the exact same way that Godzilla shows up and goes to save his child in that movie. Like, even some of the cinematography is very much the same.
See, I don't remember Space Godzilla enough to comment.
Well, Godzilla rises from the ocean. Our main heroes are, like, having a problem on the beach. Godzilla walks through the island. We see Godzilla walking through the island. This is where he does, if I remember correctly, doesn't he destroy the base while walking towards the Kamacuras?
Yeah, he destroys a bit of the base.
And then once he shows up, which there's no way that Godzilla appears within 5 minutes of the Kamacuras opening the egg. Like, there's no way. It's definitely been like an hour or so. And somehow the 3 Kamacuras have not killed Manila yet, which I thought was kind of weird.
Yeah, there's a couple points where I feel like it would work if we didn't have, like, in between Godzilla's arrival, like, there was an intercut with, like, a couple of the human scenes. It makes it feel like more time is passing than there actually should be.
Right. And that's something that happens throughout the film, is they are very, which, I mean, I appreciate, but it also, like I said, is a problem. They intercut the kaiju stuff with the humans, right? Like, it's a Sekizawa script.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to keep of course you're going for the kaiju, so you want to keep your audience invested, but you're cutting in between to the human characters to get the story moving along, because the humans directly impact everything in this movie. They're the reason the Kamacuras grow. The Kamacuras then unleash Manila, which is why Godzilla shows up. Goramaki. And
I mean, Godzilla was already headed here, to be fair.
True. But our human characters are partially the reason why Kumonga wakes up.
But to be fair, more Manila.
Yeah, but I mean, in all fairness, it's because Sayako, that's her name, right?
Yeah.
Calls Manila to come to the rescue, which is then why Manila wakes up Kumonga, and like everything that the kaiju do is directly because the humans have started it. So, I mean, it's a Sekizawa script, and that's one of Sekizawa's big, like, tropes you find. But because they jump back and forth, the film either loses all of its tension or messes with the time frame, or just throws you, like, it gives you whiplash, because you're going back and forth, and it does that throughout the entirety of this film.
Yeah.
There is no sequence where you're following the human characters for 10 minutes, and then we cut to a 2-minute montage of chaos and destruction. There is none of that, because they are on an island, and they're trying to anthropomorphize Godzilla and Manila more so in this film than any previous one, to make you grow those feelings for Manila and for Godzilla for the final shot.
Right.
But as Godzilla approaches the Kamacuras, he is very brutal with how he attacks them and how he kills them.
He goddamn body slams one of them.
And then the other gets roasted.
Yeah. Which they actually burnt 2 of the props when Godzilla, like, roasts the Kamacuras.
Poor Kamacuras.
Yeah.
Which we get we get a composited shot of a piece of the Kamacuras flying at our human characters. And I'm just going to say this now, the compositing is not amazing here, but it's not. I mean, it's
not the worst. It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. But after Godzilla dispatches 2 of the Kamacuras and the other flees, he just leaves Manila.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke, but it is definitely funny. But Godzilla literally swam to the island, fought 2 Kamacuras, was planning on fighting a third, killed 2, planned to kill a third, and then just leaves the just hatched Manila alone again. It's like, what? Like, I don't know if it was meant to be just as a funny gag, but it doesn't make sense for Godzilla to just do all this.
No, he just expects his son to be able to walk, I'd say.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
That's how I see it. He kind of expects Manila to just, like, now that Manila's safe, he can go on his own, but then he's like, I guess I should come back and bring the kid with me. Give him a ride.
I guess Godzilla's an example of what I would be like if I was a parent, so.
What, abusive?
No. No. Expecting them to know what they're doing without teaching them.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also
Godzilla's slightly less abusive in this version of the story, because in the manga, from what I've skim read of the manga, he just straight up, like, punches Manila in one scene.
Right, no, there's a lot of, and like that's a lot of what the cut footage is a lot of Godzilla just being an abusive parent, expecting Manila to know what he's doing.
That. I really want to see that. I'm kidding.
The Son of Godzilla abusive cut. But during all of this, Goromaki somehow falls into the cavern that Sayako was residing in. Plot convenience, of course, but nonetheless.
Yeah, and after she has after she feeds Manila and Godzilla takes the kid, she goes back to the cave and the two discover each other.
And there's some back and forth, accusations about being a thief and whatnot, and some kind of death threats.
Yeah.
They suddenly
she throws a knife at him.
But then they suddenly are okay after a little bit.
Yeah. The Akira Kubo charisma.
But real talk, Kubo, like, absolutely rizzes up Sayako throughout the entirety of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, you're just waiting for them to, like, kiss at this point. Like, that's...
I mean, the film never, like, really draws attention to it, but, like, it's very clearly happening.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end, they're literally holding each other's hands, so, like,
No, there's definitely some strong feelings going on.
Yeah, it's just... I find it odd how there's just this romance that it's just never called attention to. It's just kind of a background thing.
Right, and they don't...
I kind of like that.
I like it too, but it's... Part of me wonders if it's because I'm pretty sure there was a little bit of flashback due to the Nick Adams and Mizuno romance. Because of how it was, how it was portrayed. Part of me wonders because of stuff like that, they kind of backtracked from doing romance plots. But even then, Sekizawa, like, if you look back at Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster,
there's definitely, like, in Ghidorah, yeah, there's a romance plot. I mean, the ending of Ghidorah takes a lot of influence from the ending of, like, a whole nother romance film.
Right. But it's also, like, because it's with Shindo and Princess Salno. And it's like this background thing that's never established. And it just kind of rests in the story. And that's kind of how this one is too. It just kind of rests in the story.
Yeah.
Except this one, they get to show it off a little bit more because it's not a princess from another country and some cop.
But after their back and forth, Goromaki introduces Sayako to the rest of the group. And they once again also end up fending off the last remaining Kamacuras.
With rifles.
I mean, the idea is more that it's being. To be fair, the idea is more that the Kamacuras is led away by the sounds of Manila.
Right, right. Also, you kind of didn't, you glossed over this, but Sayako just suddenly is chill with everybody, and like when her and Goromaki first interact, she like accuses him of trying to steal this book that she has, and it's her father's diary. And then she just starts handing it out. Like,
yeah.
They Goromaki and her talk for like 5 minutes. It's love at first sight, and then it cuts to them, Goromaki introducing her to everyone else, and then she just starts.
And Tagao Takashima's just reading it.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, look at
like,
this!
What's this Kamanga thing? Why is it mentioned all throughout this book? It's kind of concerning. We might have our third act villain here."
It's just weird because I feel like they were setting her up to be more of this like character to push back against everybody else, and really she just kind of goes along with everything. There really isn't a single moment where she says no.
Yeah,
it really feels like a plot, like
after her initial meeting with Goro. Yeah, you're pretty much right.
And I don't know if they just maybe they just cut all of the like back and like the attempted like not working with them just to speed the plot along, because I mean it definitely does that. But part of me too just kind of feels like they use Sayako as kind of just like a plot device. Like she's the character to help get Goromaki to do this stuff and be our main character doing all of the daring, exciting thrills, because there's a small hint, a small spice of romance in this movie that barely gets addressed outside of the fact that they're always together.
Yeah.
And the notebook that she has is her father's, who was studying on the island during the war, never came back. And so she's been there her whole life and knows the island is what she set up. But that really doesn't do a whole lot. It only helps like twice in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an odd setup.
Like, it establishes that she has a home and that you can swim out to the coast from her home. And that's it.
Yeah. Following this, we get a couple scenes of nice scenes of Manila playing with Godzilla, or more specifically his tail.
Which Manila's grown up quick because he suddenly looks way different.
Yeah. I mean, I think the implication is that some amount of time has passed.
Nothing's established. Like, it goes from them talking about what is Kumonga and who is Sayako to, oh, Manila's playing with Godzilla. And then they're living in the cave. Like,
right. I mean, to be fair, there is like a fade transition that fades are typically used to show the passage of some time. The issue is we just have no clue how much time.
Right, because really and honestly, our characters don't change. And I think part of that just comes from the fact that, like, Goromaki and Sayako's relationship doesn't change after Goromaki introduces her to everybody else. And everybody else's relationship with Sayako doesn't change once she's introduced to them.
I mean, the only character to, like, actively change over the film is Furukawa. Just because he's going mad for the majority of the film. And then at the end, he's just okay.
He's hunky-dory.
After Manila's playtime with Papa's tail, yes, we get a bit of the two lovebirds just running around the island exploring, and then have a little encounter with little baby Godzilla.
Which, I mean, this is a cute moment. I will give it that. It's a cute moment. It has its fun moments.
Right. And I think it's funny that Godzilla's just such a strict dad that he doesn't let Manila, play with the humans.
Right. No, Manila's temper tantrum is very funny. Like that's probably one of the funniest moments.
A whole bit. And then he just drags him by the tail. Like, it's an iconic scene from this movie for a reason.
Right. No, there's I love seeing the Godzilla Manila stuff because there's a lot of like just fun, like heartwarming.
It's just fun to watch. And it's funny. This movie's pretty funny throughout, honestly.
What's funny, what I guess it's not funny, but what's interesting is at this point we're already over halfway through the film.
Yeah. And we're like at the 45-minute mark.
Right. And it kind of baffled me. I was upon this rewatch. So for me, like, this was one of the first Godzilla movies I had seen. And I always remember just like it took me like a lot to sit through the movie because it always felt like it dragged. This was never one that I really liked. And I didn't rewatch it a lot. Part of that was because it was difficult to get the Sony DVD, but either way, like nonetheless, rewatching it this time, I was kind of surprised how quickly the movie moves.
Oh yeah, this movie was a breeze to watch, even more than Ibra, honestly. Because the thing with Ibra is, I think most of Ibra is a little bit more fun. That last like 10 minutes of that,
it's a slog
of Ibra. Just kind of, it doesn't kill the movie for me, but it does. It does. That whole last like 10-15 minutes of Ibra just really feels like a step down from everything that
it
came
does.
before.
No, once they get to the ticking time bomb cliche story,
even
plot,
just a little bit before that, I think like basically like around like the giant condor scene is kind of when the movie just kind of something's off the rest of the movie for me.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree, and thankfully this movie doesn't really do that. But I think it's also,
I feel like this film is always like it's a fairly consistent film.
It's the pacing of this movie is very consistent.
Yeah.
But with that there is issues which really start to come out at the end of the film, which I'll talk about once we get to that point in the film. But after this moment of the Godzilla Manila stuff, we do get kind of an interesting side thing that is the gateway into the final act, which is all of the men suddenly have a high fever.
Right.
Which is some sort of island disease,
I guess.
That Sayako just knows, oh, you got to drink the red water from Godzilla's home.
Yeah.
Which my guess is the red water just has minerals in it that, like,
something
take care
like
of it.
that.
Yeah. But to get there, you have to go through
Kumonga Valley.
Which, typical plot setup. But it is what it is.
It's fine.
It's fine. But no, we get to go from here, and of course Goromaki and Sayako go off on this journey, which during this journey we see that Goro is a klutz.
Yeah. He knocks some boulders.
Twice. Within 2 minutes.
Yeah. But luckily, Kumonga remains undisturbed. Eventually they arrive at the Red Lake. And this is where we go to probably the film's most iconic scene.
Oh, easily. Easily the most iconic scene.
Yeah. Either that or the temper tantrum, I'd say. That's like the only like competitor.
This takes the cake.
And yeah, in this scene, Godzilla tries teaching his son how to be king of the monsters. First teaching him how to roar, and then teaching his atomic breath. And this is also where we get our little abuse.
Yeah, he threatens to hit him and then just smashes his tail to get the atomic breath to work. But I mean, this is both a heartwarming and comedic sequence.
And really funny scene.
Yeah.
And then it has a nice ending when Godzilla goes to sleep, and then after Manila once again figures out how to do the full beam, he's really happy, and then tries to go to sleep next to his father.
And so at this point, I believe Sayako and Goromaki they're bystanders. They're watching this happen.
Yeah. I mean, they're waiting for the two to go to sleep so they can take the water. Right.
And then they get the water, they bring it back, and everything's fine. And then the next day, Sayako is just wandering, collecting plants, and the final Kamakuris appears and, tries to eat her, and she calls out to Manila to come save her like he's Mothra or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, in the midst of this, Furukawa also has a breakdown again and just shoots at the professor. And that's why Sayako goes out, because she's looking for herbs.
Right, that's right, to help with was it the wound?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, after she calls for Manila comes trotting down the mountain or the hill or whatever, which she's an awful human being. We just need to say that. She's literally calling a child to come help her, even though she knows that the child is no match for this thing.
This is why Goro is the only nice person in the movie.
Goro's the only person who doesn't commit child abuse or technical kidnapping or espionage. The dude's just there to get a story and then forgets the story and becomes everybody's cook, and then becomes romantically involved with the new cook. And he has to be the one to solve the problems. He needs a pay increase or something.
Is he really getting paid, though?
No! And we know that none of the other people are, because they say they volunteered to do it. Nobody's getting paid but the professor. This is secretly a story about how the professor is taking advantage of people, just as how Godzilla takes advantage of his power. The professor and Godzilla are the same person, and everybody else is Manila being abused by the island, which is also represented as the Kamakuri, and they're all just getting abused, and Goromaki is the one Manila who's willing to look at life as a happy thing, and then
what does Kumonga represent, then?
Yoseo Tsuchiya's character, who's an inconvenience all the time. And so, they have this whole thing, and Goromaki is just Manila for the humans that, is the heart who has to save everybody, and everybody suddenly becomes happy because Goromaki learns how to use satellites and, becomes the action hero that they all needed, because everybody's a professor who volunteered and is not getting paid for this. And in theory, the only person who is going to get out of this with a job is Goromaki, because he's definitely going to go home, write his adventure, and win the Nobel Prize for Best Story.
I mean, the professor might win a few things if he's not arrested.
Oh no, he's going to get arrested for abandoning his post. And then Akihito Hirata's character is going to get arrested for espionage. And everybody else is going to be arrested for knowing too much about international affairs. And then Sayako's going to be taken in and experimented, because she's this person who's been stuck on an island for 30 years and doesn't know a thing about actual humanity.
Wait, how come she didn't get affected by the radiation at all, even more so than the scientists?
Because she lived in that cave.
I guess.
It was established that because of the cave,
yeah, they do say that.
She wasn't impacted by the radioactive storms, and the fact that she knew about the red water. I guarantee you, she's drank enough where she's immune to the high fever that the island has. But her dad's dead.
Yeah, but he died a while back, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. 7 years is long enough.
During this little scuffle with the Kamakuras, where Manila just gets absolutely...
He gets hit once and like falls on the ground, and there's that iconic image of Manila just like staring at the ground, contemplating his life decisions.
Yeah, and then another time where the Kamakuras hits him and he just spins around. But eventually, during this fight, Manila ends up walking over some boulders, and they go down into Kumonga Valley and end up waking up the spider.
Which the music for Kumonga and the build-up and the use of the cinematography for Kumonga's reveal is great. Kumonga is the highlight of this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, effects-wise, he absolutely is. Just, like, the puppet is genuinely really impressive.
Kumonga is one of two examples of how the Showa era made a puppet look lively. The other would be Ghidorah. Ghidorah in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is so lively with its movements. I love it. And Kumonga's the exact same way. Right.
Nah, Kumonga looks amazing. Like, the Kamakuras look pretty good, but, like, the Kumonga is the effects highlight of the film, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And then they even have, like, a giant, like, life-size prop of one of his legs for, like, a couple scenes where when he's chasing the human characters and he tries grabbing at them.
Oh, yeah, no, I love the giant leg. Like, that, there's a lot of... when I was watching it, I was wondering this. I was wondering, because there's some shots with, like, giant claws of Kamakuras and then the giant leg as well. I really wonder how much influence like 50s giant bug movies had on Son of Godzilla, because like some of this like you would get in those movies.
Right.
I loved the effects for the Kamakuras and the Kumonga, more specifically Kumonga.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's the highlight of the film. Mm-hmm. Like outside of the scenes of Godzilla and like Manila interacting, like Kumonga is the spectacle of the film.
150%. Now, when Kumonga comes up, that begins the development of the end of the movie.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the Kamakuras does not get out of this, but Manila does from this fight. Kumonga...
Well, the first, like, before Kumonga actually rises, but after he's been disturbed, Godzilla comes to save Manila.
That's right.
And blasts the Kamakuras, but it ends up fleeing before it can be killed. And then later on, while Kumonga is just like hunting, I guess, and just hiding within the trees.
There's a shot of Kumonga in the trees that's amazing. And I think it's like right before the final fight. There's a shot like this very close up, like claustrophobic shot of Kumonga that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even before this, there's also a scene of him, like, just trapping, like, our human characters in Psycho's cave, which they moved into.
Right, and there's even, before the hunt of, or the hunt of Kumonga, during the whole sequence with Kamakuras and Sayako and Manila, Kumonga does end up like trapping Goromaki and Sayako in like this little corner of the cave, and they have to climb out and get away from Kumonga.
Yeah.
Which this is where we see the use of the one thing that can melt or cut Kumonga's webbing, which is fire.
Which they learned from the notes of Psycho's father.
Right. And then, we get the hunt of Kumonga, where, we see some of our characters inspecting the towers, even though that doesn't make a lot of sense. Everything is broken for the most part, but
yeah, they even ask the professor, like, why are you doing this?
And he's just like, I want to stay busy.
Yeah. Eventually Kumonga attacks him and basically traps them in the cave. And this is where the professor decides, hey, we need to get out of here. Let's try the experiment once more, so that not only can we prove the experiment works, but also it can help us. And we can freeze the island for some reason that's necessary. Which I guess I would presume it would be to dispel the monsters, but kind of a unnecessary step, all things considered.
Why would you say that?
They could just... I guess with Kumonga being there, that is a bit of a problem where freezing him would probably be helpful. But, I don't know, it just feels weird the way the professor's just like, all right, let's do this, just cause.
It's okay. I'm gonna liken it to something else. It's like when Serizawa in King of the Monsters says, "Let's use a nuke to wake Godzilla back up," and they just do it without any they just do it. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Which I was surprised they even had the capabilities of conducting the experiment again without having a base.
Yeah.
But the thing they have to do is set up a antenna to help with the radio waves. So they have to go through the underwater passage that Sayako uses to get to the coast and swim. Goramaki volunteers, Sayako goes. Somehow the antenna's waterproof.
Yeah, they just wrap it in something and it's fine.
Which, okay, fine.
At least they cared enough to wrap it.
Plot convenience got a plot convenience. They go out, they set it up. During this time, Manila shows up and Kumonga starts tangoing with Manila.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kamakura shows up too, if I remember correctly, during all of this.
Yeah, but it's swiftly killed by Kumonga.
Which now, and the funny thing is, they're all fighting on top of the cave. So the cave's caving in, and they're like, we're gonna die. So it's it's once again a ticking time bomb kind of story, where if they don't do this quickly, between Manila and Kumonga and the dead Kamakuras carcass, the cave will collapse and they will all die from the cave falling in on them. And if they can't get the island to freeze, then they're going to be stuck on the island and not make it. Also, during this time, they fixed the radio, and they were told that they're sending a rescue team to come pick them up. So that's why they're like, we're going to, prep for this and be ready to help them. And, be ready to get out with them. And Goramaki and Sayako, are, getting it all set up, and they're getting ready to go. Kumonga's pretty close to killing Manila, pretty much. When Godzilla appears and starts fighting. During this, there's also the whole... They're actually getting ready to launch, and they have the radio wave issues again, but they disappear. Why we don't... I guess it's because the radio waves come with Manila crying, and when Godzilla showed up,
the professor states that because Godzilla doesn't show up until they've actually set off the thing, or he doesn't wake up. Sorry, until they've actually set off the experiment. But the professor speculates either Manila's dead or he just gave up trying to call his father.
which I don't think that either of those are a good reason. Like, neither of those really make that much sense with the context we're given.
Manila just accepted his fate, I guess. He knew his dad was a deadbeat. But fortunately, Godzilla does show up in the nick of time to save the little monster.
And during all of this, the weather experiment somehow is successful, and everybody's getting ready to leave. Now, they get out very quickly.
Yeah.
And with that, the entire conclusion just becomes underwhelming because there is no stake now.
Yeah, no, the stakes in the final fight are Godzilla and Manila gonna survive?
And with the fact that, when you think about it, it feels really obvious they're going to win. Like, A, it's 2v1. B, the spider's probably not going to deal with the cold nearly as well as Godzilla and Manila. And also, it's like, Kumonga's one weakness is fire. And Godzilla uses atomic breath. So, like, everything's stacked up against Kumonga.
Right. Yeah.
And with none of our human characters being in danger, there is nothing left. Like, the ticking time bomb thing is no longer working, which, it's nice that they didn't go straight, like, reuse that same plot. But now it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I waiting on? I'm just waiting
here for the spectacle at this point.
And all we're waiting on is just Godzilla to deliver a final blow.
And the fight itself is decently fun, to be fair.
Yeah, there's a few shots like when Kumonga's spraying his web and Godzilla's using his atomic breath to, like, melt it before it can get to them.
Yeah, and then when Kumonga, like, plays dead and then tries to, like, make himself, like, tower over Godzilla as well.
And the eye shot, which that's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
Which, for anybody who hasn't seen this movie, Godzilla, like, stares at Kumonga's mouth just pulsating, and Kumonga just injects Godzilla's eye with venom.
Yeah.
Which is definitely gonna hurt.
Yeah, but he seems to be fine after 10 seconds. So
it's Godzilla.
Yeah. He doesn't care.
And then snow starts falling, and they're finishing the fights. And by this point, like, it is literally, we're just waiting for it to be over. I do think the Kumonga Godzilla fight does go on a little longer than it really should. Once the snow starts falling.
I don't know. It honestly wraps up pretty quick. It's like only like a minute, maybe two, really. Like, once the snow is like full, when it's full and snowing.
Maybe. But
you just have TikTok attention span, man.
It's because there's no stake left. We know what's going to happen. And, what happens is Godzilla and Manila team up. They set Kumonga ablaze, and our human characters stand by and cheer as they're off the island, and the island's freezing over.
Godzilla tries to leave, but Manila just can't keep up. So the King of the Monsters decides to turn back and hibernate with his son. The two hugging each other as they freeze in the...
Which is sad. It's a sad ending.
It's a nice ending.
But I will say I do love the joke, because after this we cut back to our human characters, and I guess the human characters, we go to them before we get the final shot of them together hibernating. And there's this funny joke where like it looks like another Godzilla's about to show up because the ocean's bubbling and whatnot, and our human characters are like, "What's that in the water?" And it's a submarine sent by the UN to pick them up. And they're like, why couldn't they have told us it was a submarine?
Did they say that is that in the dub? Or?
That's the dub version.
Okay. I don't think they say that in the Japanese version.
But after that, we get a final wide shot of Godzilla and Manila hibernating. And then we, cut away to a wider shot of the island as a whole, and we get the end credits scene. Or not end credits scene, end credits title sequence.
Yeah, we just get the end. And that was Son of Godzilla.
So, when the film came out, Tanaka was actually surprised how poorly the film did.
Mm-hmm.
Which led to him making the executive decision that the next Godzilla film would be his last, which would, end up being Destroy All Monsters, which seems like that was always the plan.
I mean, Destroy All Monsters, I've read somewhere that Destroy All Monsters may have been like one of the early scripts for that was actually in the works around the same time as the scripts for this film, or at least as this film was being in production.
But it didn't do well at the box office, and I don't think it did that well critically either. And that led to Destroy All Monsters, which would lead to Godzilla going down a rabbit hole of the 1970s. Now, I feel like I've done a lot of complaining.
Yes, you have.
But I will say Son of Godzilla is definitely better than I remember it being.
Mm-hmm.
It's very quick. The pace never slows down.
Oh yeah, this is a breeze of a film to watch.
And it's enough to keep me invested up until the human characters are no longer engaged in the plot, really.
See, I'm invested enough in Godzilla and Manila as well that I'm fine with that. I do think it's odd how quickly the humans are just safe and how uninvolved they are in that.
Right.
But, even though I know Godzilla and Manila are going to win, like, I don't think for a second Kumonga's going to kill either of them. It's like, I'm invested enough in those two characters that I want to see how this battle's going to end.
Sure. And I do, the kaiju action for the most part, I think is pretty good in this film. I think the Kamakris Manila fights are great. The Kamakris Godzilla fights are great. I love the Kumonga Kamakris fight. That's something unusual to have two antagonistic kaiju fight each other and actually, like, one gets dispatched from the other. I think that's really cool. Seeing, like, Godzilla and Manila suffer in this movie and, like, grow is pretty, is pretty interesting and sometimes depressing and whatnot to see. But I do also feel like their execution in general is pretty neutered in contrast to Kamakris and Kumonga that definitely steal the show throughout this movie. Manila and Godzilla have the iconic moments, but if you want to talk about like good special effects sequences, the scenes that have the best effects in this movie are the Kamakris and Kumonga stuff.
Right, but I mean the effects for like Manila and Godzilla are pretty simple, since Godzilla is just
the same as always.
Typical, same as always. Suitmation. Manila is a combination of suitmation from what's his name?
Little Man Marchand.
and then like a Tushaku puppet
Right.
that, depending on the source, is either controlled by wires or the theater pamphlet, I think, says something about it being remote controlled. I think. I'm not quite sure which one's more accurate. To me, it looks a bit more like it's a wire. It's a puppet controlled by wires, but it is a theater pamphlet saying that, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Rough translation of the theater pamphlet, mind you. Very, very rough, so that could also be why.
See, I think my biggest issue in general comes with the human cast. I think the human cast, honestly, is probably like the most uninteresting aspect of this. Even our like main duo is just there.
They're entertaining enough to watch, and like where I'm not bored.
Right, they
but
hold the
also,
narrative together.
Yeah, but they're not particularly. This isn't really a very memorable cast, I'd say.
Right. Honestly, I forgot that Sahara and Hirata and Kubo were all in this movie.
See, I remembered Kubo. Sahara, I had no clue. I did not remember at all was in this film. The only ones I tended to really remember are Maki, Psycho, and to a degree, the Professor.
Right. But I think this also just goes to show that by this point, they were just kind of, I don't know, this point in the Godzilla franchise, it really started to feel like they were trying, this is the equivalent to what the legendary films are doing now, except worse now. The films are filled with cast that isn't very memorable or interesting to watch. They just can carry the narrative to where it needs to go with a heavy emphasis on the kaiju action, trying to get people to go for that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
hey, so far at least Monarch looks to be actually having interesting characters for once, which is nice.
Right. And see, that goes to my biggest issue with this film, and that is how they cover the topic of controlling the weather. Outside of a few lines, it's not established how awful that would be. And I feel like that is one of the biggest flaws this movie has, is it pulls a King of the Monsters where it doesn't tackle the impact that it has.
Which is kind of ironic when you realize that both are climate change related.
Right. And, I mean, Son of Godzilla does cover the idea of radioactivity and how radiation is bad with the radioactive storm, because that's awful. That, like, causes the entire problem of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't talk about it. They move past it to get to the next point. This film is so busy trying to get us to the final climax, it does not stop to look at what it's got. And honestly, I would say this is probably Sekizawa's weakest that we've covered so far, because it just doesn't have the weight that it should.
Right.
This one definitely feels like Sekizawa was phoning it in.
Yeah, especially with that human plot. I really like the monster stuff, but it's just like, as you're saying, the human plot just is really, really flawed.
Mm-hmm. But it is fun. And that's something this movie does do well, is it is fun. Like, the score, it's not very powerful. It's not the most memorable outside of the Manila theme, and I'd say the Kumonga theme. But it is fun.
Right. And it fits the tone of the film quite well as well. Like, this is a fun, self-contained movie. It's there's nothing real grand going on. It's just a fun little island adventure.
Right. Which, in a way, I like that because it's not trying to tackle as much as Ebirah was, because Ebirah was like covering a lot. It was trying to tackle a lot with like terrorists.
It had a lot of things going on, but it doesn't really do much with any of it.
Right. And even though it has a lot more going on, it feels a lot slower. Despite,
I wouldn't say a lot slower up until like the ending.
And it's only 30 seconds longer, really, maybe a minute. But it definitely feels a little bit longer. And I mean, both have the same outcome, but one feels a little quicker to the point. One feels like you had to kind of work to get to that point, which Ebirah is in that situation. So with that being said, like I will say this, I think Son of Godzilla is a more fun film. I think if you're going for your typical Showa film, this is one of the worst examples. I would actually go as far to say as this is the worst example of what a stereotypical Showa film is expected to be, especially from the 60s. But it's not the worst.
Oh, God, no. God, no.
Not from the 60s. I think there's a few films worse than it. And that kind of leads into my ranking, which I'm going to hold off on so we can get your final thoughts and then go into the cast and crew and then wrap up on our rankings and then participate in the most noblest of podcasting traditions. So I'm going to hand this over to you, Rex, now to kind of give your final thoughts.
Yeah, my final thoughts. I feel like you're a little harsher on this movie than I am. Like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of issues with the human plot, particularly revolving around Professor Kasumi's experiment. But at the end of the day, I do find that this film is really entertaining. Like, at 87 minutes, it is a breeze to watch. You know, the special effects, while not quite reaching the heights of like this like the early to mid 60s in terms of miniatures, the puppet work with Kamakuris and Kumonga are absolutely a highlight. And then even when they're not on screen, just the scenes between Godzilla and Manila are iconic for good reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really happy to rewatch this film, especially by accidental coincidence. I rewatched this on the anniversary of Manila's naming ceremony, of all things. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed this film, but I've never disliked it either.
See, I will say this: I started. Like, when I became a Godzilla fan, this was probably one of my least favorite Godzilla films. I didn't like Manila.
I didn't... When I was younger, before I'd actually watched the movie, because I didn't watch this until I was like 13, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was really like first introduced to the franchise, I was like with everyone else, but like, man, Manila's stupid. Why does Manila exist? But, as the years gone on, I'd like to think I've matured to the point where, like, nah, I love Manila. he is a big part of the, well, maybe not huge part of the Godzilla franchise, but he's a part of the Godzilla franchise, and I like him,
Right. See, it's funny because
I can imagine this franchise without him,
It's funny because I had to, Eric tagged me in that Showa ranking video, and I just took my list that I made back in 2019, and I, at the time, I think I had rewatched 54 Raids Again, King Kong versus Mothra, and Astro Monster, so like I took those and like moved my ranking a little bit. But in that, I was like, I hate Manila. I don't really want to, like, he's in it. I don't like it. Which I'm happy in that video, that is either going to be out by now or is about to be out. I say, if you want my actual, like, updated thoughts, listen to the show, because this is where my fresh thoughts are going to be there, where I can say, this is what I truly think. Manila is not a problem in this movie.
No, God, no.
Manila is not a problem in this movie. Like, honestly, I don't think Manila is an issue. I'm firmly stuck with the humans.
Not liking the design of Manila, but, like, honestly, I don't care. I like it enough.
Yeah, no, I think you and I both can agree that designs are the least of our concern when it comes to first, like, for, like, a character's first appearance.
Right. And yeah, it's also like, I'm so used to this design. Where it's like, I've seen this design, like, throughout my life, to the point where it's like, there's no way I can really look at this design and dislike it. Just because of, like, the nostalgia and all that stuff associated with it. Like, I can see why others don't like it, but, like, I don't know. I like Manila.
See, and for me, I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent. Like, I don't hate him. I don't love him, but I'm not going to say he's an issue, right? Like, I think saying he's an issue is very much not fair.
I mean, I think his best design is in Final Wars, but, you know,
of course,
Final Wars is peak cinema, so it makes sense.
But my issues with this film come from the writing and the characters, the human characters. But I will say, from that show a ranking video to now, it definitely has moved up. But before we talk about that, I think it's time to roll the credits.
Go ahead.
The film was directed by Jun Fukuda, who was assistant director on Rodan, director of The Secret of the Talesian, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Operation Mystery, Kanto 55, The Great Outer Space Adventure, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which he co-wrote, Submersion of Japan, Espy, The War in Space, Monkey, and writer of horrors.
E-Spy, by the way.
E-Spy?
Yes. It's literally spelled in katakana. Supai. Supai.
But the English title is ESPY. E-Spy.
Yeah. E-Spy.
And wrote Horrors of the Wolf. Now, last time, so if you're listening, you probably have listened to the Ebirah episode.
Hopefully. And if you haven't, do it right now.
And if you don't know who Tomoyuki Tanaka is, I'm sorry, but I have a whole page just written of his credits to even mention. He did all the Godzilla movies from 54 to 95. He worked on the Mothra movies up to Rebirth of Mothra 2. And every single Toho sci-fi tokusatsu movie from 1954 to, like, 1989 he worked on. So, I'm just going to say that and move on.
Yes. No need to say it all like last time.
Kazue Shiba was the co-writer with Shunichi Sekizawa, who wrote Varan the Unbelievable, Battle in Outer Space, The Secret of the Talesian, Mothra, King Kong vs. Godzilla, The Lost World of Sinbad, Atragon, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Dogora, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of Astro Monster, episodes of Ultraman, episodes of Kaiju Busca, The Killing Bottle, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Aegon the Atomic Dragon, and he acted as supervisor on that, episodes of Mighty Jack, Latitude Zero, All Monsters Attack, Godzilla vs. Gigan, and story by credits on Godzilla vs. Megalon and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Marasu Sato, the composer, worked on Godzilla Raids Again, Half Human, The H-Man, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Submersion of Japan, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, The Blue Stigma, Akira Kurosawa films such as Yojimbo, Sanjiro, High and Low, Redbeard, I Live in Fear, The Lower Depths, The Hidden Fortress, and The Bad Sleep Well. Sadamasa Arikawa was the director of special effects. He worked on episodes of Ultra Q, Ultraman, Kaiju Busca, and Ultra 7. He also worked on Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Destroy All Monsters, episodes of Mighty Jack and Fight Mighty Jack, Space Amoeba, episodes of Rainbow Man, and uncredited for The Mighty Peking Man and The Phoenix. As for your main cast, you had Tadao Takashima as Dr. Kusumi, who was in Fearful Attack of the Flying Saucers, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Atragon, and Frankenstein vs. Baragon. Beverly Madea, who played Sayako Maeda, played Sayako Matsumiya, who didn't have any other credits I could find of mention, but I did want to say that Jun Fukuda reportedly said she was very difficult to work with. You had Akira Kubo as Goro Maki, who was in Ishiro Honda's Farewell Rabal, The Three Treasures, Gorath, Matango, Invasion of the Astro Monster, Destroy All Monsters, Space Amoeba, Gamera Guardian of the Universe, The Great Buddha Arrival, and a couple episodes of Ultra Q. Akihito Hirata, who played Fujisaki, was in Ishiro Honda's Farewell Rabal, Godzilla 54, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla, Rodan, the H-Man, The Secret of the Talesian, Varan the Unbelievable, The Three Treasures, Mothra, Gorath, Atragon, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Latitude Zero, episodes of Ultraman, Rainbow Man, and Fireman. Kenji Sahara, who played Morio, was in Ishiro Honda's Farewell Rabal, Godzilla 54, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Destroy All Monsters Attack, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, Godzilla Final Wars, Rodan, The Mysterians, Gorath, Matango, Atragon, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, The War of the Gargantuas, Space Amoeba, Superior Ultra 8 Brothers, episodes of Ultra Q, Ultra 7, Return of Ultraman, Ultraman Leo, Ultraman 80, Ultraman Nexus, Ultraman Mebius, Ultraman Max, Mighty Jack, Jumborg Ace, Submersion of Japan, Dai Tetsugen 17, Heisei Ultra 7, and appeared in Ultra Q Monster Legend Jun Manjome's Confession. Yoshio Tsuchiya, who played Fukuwara, was in Godzilla Raids Again, Invasion of Astro Monster, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, The Mysterians, The Human Vapor, The H-Man, The Secret of the Talesian, Matango, Varan the Unbelievable, Battle in Outer Space, The Bad Sleep Well, Yojimbo, High and Low, and appeared in an early Minoru Kawasaki film, Earth Defense Girl Iko-kan 3, Great Edo Operation. Kenichiro Maruyama, who played Ozawa, was in Gorath, Atragon, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Destroy All Monsters, episodes of Ultraman, Ultra 7, Kaiju Busca, and Mighty Jack. Seishiro Kuno, who played Tashiro, was in Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, Destroy All Monsters, The War of the Gargantuas, King Kong Escapes, and episodes of Ultraman, Ultra 7, Fight Mighty Jack, Iron King, Super Robot Red Baron, Robot Detective, and Zone Fighter. Yasuhiko Saijo, who played Suzuki, was in episodes of Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7, Heisei Ultraman, Ultraman Max, Kaiju Busca, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, Destroy All Monsters, Latitude Zero, Ultra Q the Movie, Ultraman Zerth 2, Ultraman Cosmos, The First Contact, Superior 8 Ultra Brothers, and Kaiju Mono. He also appeared on the radio show Ultra Q Club. And with that, that is your main cast and crew.
Well, with that all being said, I think we should move on to the ranking.
Okay. So, do we want to start at the bottom as we always do?
Yeah. Predictably, I think we've got, I'm sure we both have at number 8, Godzilla Raids Again.
Correct. Awful movie.
Following that, for me, at number 7, I have Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. Do we differ
For me,
here?
at number 7, I have Mothra versus Godzilla.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I think the film's utterly boring.
Well, speaking of Mothra vs. Godzilla, at number 6, I have Mothra vs. Godzilla.
Well, at my number 6, I have Ibira Horror of the Deep.
Oh, so we've got them swapped around. I see.
Yeah.
Well, at number 5, do you have Son of Godzilla?
I do.
Oh, fancy that. Because so do I.
So that's interesting because you said I was more critical, but here we are putting it at the same ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Seemingly the thing we disagree on the most is Ebirah and Mothra versus Godzilla. So at your number 4...
I got King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Likewise.
Invasion of the Astro Monster at number 3.
Yep.
And then number 2, as much as it pained me last time, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
No, it's supposed to be Godzilla 54.
And then number 1 is 54.
Ghidorah the Threaded Monster. No, you got them mixed up.
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rewatch Ghidorah again.
So I'm kind of surprised with how our rankings are. Like, we're agreeing a lot more than I thought we would, but there's like a handful we're disagreeing with.
Yeah, that is how opinions work.
Right, but we're like, what we're disagreeing on is within the same like area. Like, you and I disagree on 1 and 2, and we're disagreeing on 6 and 7.
Right.
Everything else is the same, which is kind of interesting to see.
Yeah. I guess you're not wrong there. But honestly, that tends to happen with a lot of our rankings, I think.
Or it's like there's just 2 we disagree on, and everything else we're like, yep, we're good.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe with an upcoming themed month, maybe something's different, but
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. But with
What
that
if you
being
end up
said,
liking Godzilla X Kong or Godzilla Kong, sorry.
what did you suggest you might like it?
No, I'm suggesting what if you like it?
Oh, there's no way I'm going to like that.
But imagine.
I can't even imagine a world.
You know what? That's so true.
Like,
I can't imagine one either.
I feel like I'm more critical of Adam Wingard and Junkie XL than you are. I don't see a world where you would like it. You would hate it more than me. I don't see that happening.
It would be funny, though.
It'd be funny. I would agree.
It would be really funny.
But with that being said, I'm curious. I mean, by the next time we record, if we really want to, we could throw Godzilla -1 on this ranking.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
So we'll have to figure out if we're going to do that or if we're going to not.
Scaring me with the fact that -1 is almost out. Jesus Christ. Or almost out in the West.
I mean, you and I will get it around the same time.
Yeah, Jesus. It doesn't even feel real.
It doesn't. The time has flown by. But I will say this. I'm genuinely happy that we've went back and we've rewatched these films because I feel like I've come out liking Ebirah in Son of Godzilla a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same. Even though I already liked Son of Godzilla, but I ended up just reaffirming my opinion on the film and actually enjoying it more than the first time I saw it a few years back.
Right. I mean, if I going off of our rankings, the way I do the rankings and then I kind of say, okay, this is kind of what each tier is. Because I feel like sometimes rankings come across as really harsh.
Mm.
I would say Ghidorah is great. 54 and Astro Monster are good. King Kong versus down to Ebirah is okay. Mothra versus is meh. And then Raids Again is actually bad.
See, I would say that Raids Again is bad. Ebirah to Mothra are alright. And then, Son of Godzilla up I enjoy. With, 54 and Ghidorah being the peak.
See, I like 54, but that movie, when I think of, okay, if you gave me if I had 4 hours to live and you said I could watch Godzilla movies in that time frame, I would absolutely just watch Ghidorah. I would watch Terror, then I'd watch Ghidorah, then I'd put on Terror and die with Terror.
Where's Final Wars?
Oh, that's true, Final Wars.
Yeah, where's the Final Wars? Where's the actual peak cinema?
Okay, in all fairness, I think, I don't know.
I would just put on Final Wars 2
Just
twice.
have it on loop.
Yes.
You die as soon as the credits start rolling.
Hey, at least I get to die to that amazing end credits theme.
Well, I think we know what your Final Wars ranking will end up being.
No.
But no, I
couldn't tell you what it'll be at. I don't have a clue.
I will say I'm curious to see where, because, I mean, if it's not obvious by now, we're covering each Godzilla movie in order. So when we do cover Destroy All Monsters, I'm curious where that's going to end up landing. I saw that at G-Fest last year, but I was really tired, so like I don't remember a lot.
I don't have the highest opinion on Destroy All Monsters, but we'll see what happens.
We will see. I will say you may expect another Godzilla episode sooner rather than later. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
But it's been genuinely, like, I'm genuinely happy we've done this, where we've, covered these Godzilla films, because it's been kind of nice to reevaluate some that I haven't seen in a long time.
Right.
But with that being said, if you're ready, I'm ready to participate in the most noblest of podcasting traditions.
Why, of course.
Why didn't you get us started?
Alrighty. Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at RexXeno, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram for Rex_Xeno. And if you want to take a look at some of my writing, go check out the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for me, hello, I'm Elijah, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem.
Yeah.
Joking aside, you can find me on the YouTube channel Monsters with Attitude, as I am a part of the rotating hosts roster for that. We do monthly live streams talking about kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place full of great people talking about various topics and having daily themes. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. I currently write for Kaiju United, and my most recent article is about Takashi Yamazaki and Godzilla -1. And if you want to see my first initial thoughts, you can go to Kaiju United the night of Wednesday, November 29th, where probably would be Thursday morning, where my review will be going live. Or you can just wait for the episode that'll be 5 hours long, where Rex and I talk about everything we've seen in that movie.
Oh boy, that'll be a fun one to edit.
My writing also has been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check my stuff out on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films, some of my older videos, along with a playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting more stuff out there. I should have a ranking video up very soon based off of old rankings and a couple of other things, so definitely check that out. I also appeared in a kaiju movie, a little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021. I made a brief cameo in the film as Skywatcher number 2, also known as Fox. It's got the big rating of a 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so you know it's peak cinema. If you want to watch it, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online realtor. Or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads, or, if you have Prime, just watch it on Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions, and my X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. But with that, I think we're going to wrap things up here, and I think it's time for the podcast links. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually, hang on, that's a lie. I'm using a MacBook right now. But you can rate us on Spotify now. That's something they'll allow you to do. If you want to stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually we'll have original artwork on there, but until then you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great community full of great people. Most recently, there was a discussion in the chat about Ready Player One and Godzilla vs. Mothra, people sharing their love or their hate, either or, on the films. It's a great community full of great people, like I said, wide range of topics. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel, like bloopers for episodes or minisodes, talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Kerchevsky on the channel, and I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry. I apologize. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DeManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed not one, but 2 Godzilla episodes this month, plus the Godzilla Day bonus and a Godzilla -1 episode coming hot and heavy within a week. So thank you guys so much. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. Kaiju, not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.